whenever you're talking about a book promotion, there's going to be excerpts that are released before the book is out that are obviously going to garner a lot of headlines. This book is no different. The Phil Mickelson stuff really became the conversation for everybody because of how big the numbers were that a professional athlete was gambling while he was in professional athletics. Now, he's disputed the Ryder Cup thing. We don't have to get into that. That ain't this type of show anyways. But whenever Phil Mickelson and you kind of link up to start gambling, how many years of success did you guys have before it maybe went a different way? And how do those types of relationships start for you throughout your history where somebody has a shit ton of money and they're like, all right, sports books can't find this guy. The government can't find this guy. This guy he's a ghost. Yeah. But somehow they find you and end up being partners. How does that whole thing start? And how many of those types of guys did you have over your run?
Well, I did business with thousands of them over my run. I couldn't bet sports books. A lot of sports books wouldn't take my business because I beat them. Excuse me. I met him in 2006 at Pebble Beach. I was playing in the AT&T at Pebble Beach. And he and I made a cut on Sunday. I was playing with Freddie Jacobson, a pro. He was playing with Steve Lyons, the guy at Ford Motor Company. That's who he had he had a business relationship with. The entire day, all he talked to me about was sports, and I never saw him again for 2 years. And I ran into him at the Wachovia Championship. I played in a pro-am there, and after the round, he approached me in the locker room. And he said, "I understand you do partnerships." And I said, "I do partnerships if someone has bigger accounts than I have, or they have places that they can bet that I can't bet." And of course, he did. He had some really big accounts. And our relationship, Pat, was real simple. It was a business relationship. It was a betting relationship that began as a business relationship for 5 years. I thought we became friends, and our friendship lasted 8 years. And then what happened is, and the only reason he's in the book is 2 chapters of 28, but he's in the book for one reason, not really for our gambling relationship. I had to explain that in order to explain, how I knew him. But the reason he's in the book, when I got indicted in the Southern District of New York for insider trading, Phil had already been interviewed by the FBI on 2 different occasions and told them I did not give him inside information. So now, when I went to trial in New York, he had told me he would come and testify. All I wanted him to do was tell the truth. In the 11th hour, his lawyers called my lawyers and said, if we call him, he's going to take the Fifth Amendment. Well, if someone tells you that, you cannot call them. So what had happened earlier, he gave $1 million back and involving this insider trading case. There was a press release issued. And the average person in the public is going to look at this press release and see him giving us $1 million back, and they're going to say, well, why did he give us $1 million back? Either he's guilty, he bought his way out, or he was an innocent victim and he bought his way out. But regardless, it makes me look guilty as hell, which was, that wasn't the case. So anyway, all I want him to do is come forward and tell the truth. But the problem was, Pat, he was jacked up in another case that began a year ago prior to that. He wired $2.8 million to a guy to pay off some offshore bookmakers. It had nothing to do with me. I didn't even know anything about it. And that federal case he was in, the guy he wired the money to, he ended up going to prison. And when Phil gave this $1 million back, all at once, poof, he's out of that case, and he won't come forward. And he won't testify in my trial. I made a mistake in the trial. I should have testified myself, but the bottom line was, there was one guy who testified against me. 2 years before that, the guy had gone in and given a voluntary interview, emphatically denied that he'd ever give me any inside information. I'd owned this stock, Pat, for 10 years. Okay. After he gave that statement, the FBI continued to investigate this guy. They found out he'd embezzled money from a battered women's charity in Dallas, Texas. They found out he filed a fraudulent tax return. They found out he actually gave inside information to someone else. And then after that, 2 years later, after he said he didn't give me inside information, he went to them and made a deal. And the deal was he would tell them that I did. He had 29 meetings with the FBI, 29 to get his story straight. And that was the only witness against me. So in our trial, the lawyers destroyed his credibility. They caught him in 25 lies. Nobody in the courtroom could believe a word the guy said. My lawyers believe, look, we got this case won. The jury can't believe this guy. We're going to wrap this case up. I had 23 witnesses to call, including myself. We put on 5 witnesses. The jury had been there 3.5 weeks. But the judge had to stop the trial on multiple occasions because the jurors were going to sleep. And one guy had already said the next week he was leaving. One of the jurors did. So we wrapped the case up. And the bottom line is they found me guilty. I went to prison. While I was in prison, Pat, my daughter committed suicide. I never heard a word from Phil Mickelson the entire time. After I was convicted, he issued a press release, distancing himself from me. He said he was going to be a lot more careful about whom he associated with. After I got out of prison, I was at a club he belongs to, I belong to. I'm playing golf with some friends. I went over, hit some balls on the range. I'm walking off. He walks up to me with that TV smile of his, and he said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're back home. I'm so glad to see you're playing golf again." And we had a few private words, and I left, and I haven't spoken to him since. But the bottom line is, when I decided to write this book, I didn't even know it at the time. 2 other fellows came forward, and one guy started doing business with him in 1995. So a lot of those figures, those documented figures, they came from him. And the 5 years worth of figures involving he and I are what in there. It's a combination of the 2 amounts of money is where the figures came from. Now, there was a guy who helped me write this book. His name was Armin Katayan. He's an investigative reporter. He worked for CBS for 8 years. He was with CBS Sports for a period of time. Very credible guy. And, he interviewed these guys, vetted them in their entirety. And so there's no question about the information being accurate. And I do want to correct one other thing, Pat.
Yes, sir.
He's created some, and I can tell possibly even yourself, there's a little bit of misunderstanding. He hadn't denied what I said. Well, all I said in my book was, Pat, he attempted to bet $400,000 on the Ryder Cup when the U.S. team played at Medina. I didn't say he bet it. I said he tried to bet it. It's right in the book. He issued a very very clever statement. He said, "I never bet on the Ryder Cup." He never denied for a second he tried to bet on the Ryder Cup. He hasn't, and I don't think he's going to.
And then Rory dunked on him. Rory dunked on him immediately afterwards. That was the entire thing, which I think, for a book sale is probably good. But for us, it was like, okay, what's going on between Phil and Billy here? And then we just hear this. You guys are never going to make up, huh? That's never going to, that feels like you probably sat in jail a few times thinking about how the hell did Phil Mickelson do this to me? And that is probably why you got to the point that you got to.
Well, Phil, Pat, when my daughter died in prison, I committed suicide. There's no question in my mind I was going to write this book. And I had 31 months in prison to play Monday morning quarterback on what happened. So Phil's in the book for one reason only, to tell the story. There's a lot of stuff about Phil that's not in my book.
All right, okay. All right, well,
So, believe it or not, I took the real high road with Phil.
Well, it does sound like there's a lot of history. We apologize that happened. Obviously, anytime a friend feels betrayed by another friend, that is going to cut the deepest. We hope that there is somehow, some way you two can get back, or not. Sounds like that ship has sailed, but we appreciate you opening up right there, because I think a lot of people were we saw it all kind of unfold on the internet over the last 2 weeks, but we didn't know the full story. We appreciate you telling us that all, and I assume it isn't easy to dive back into those feelings and emotions. So thank you for doing that in this book. That's going to help a lot of people.